The Stormbreakers are a recently created Space Marine chapter from an unknown founding, comprised mostly of the next stage of evolution of transhuman warriors, the Primaris Space Marines. It is believed that the Stormbreakers were around for longer than it is thought, since before the Ultima founding, which would explain their inclusion of regular Space Marines. Officially, their genetic lineage is descended from the Stoic and Taciturn heritage of Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Venerable Imperial Fists. However, rumors abound that the stalwart physicality displayed by these hardy battle brothers serving in the harshest of environments and Zone Mortalis war zones is nearly on par with the 14th Legion of old, the dreaded and maligned Death Guard Legion. Although some of the chapter's detractors believe that the Stormbreakers' gene seed was somehow tampered with or adulterated with a different gene stock, these rumors remain, thus far, unsubstantiated and unfounded. The Stormbreakers have a rough history with almost constant conflict and facing general distrust throughout the Imperium, but they have stayed largely loyal and are still a great asset within the Imperium Nihilus. The Stormbreakers are a very recent chapter, not appearing in records until around 800 M41. The unusual time of their appearance puts them unlikely to be from any official founding and more likely to be in their own mini-founding. They are officially linked to the architect Rogel Dawn, however the real origin of their gene seed may be much darker. The Stormbreakers' original homeworld was the Deathworld Samut, the inhabitants of which were small but hardy and with tanned skin and dark hair. Samut would later be destroyed, blown out of orbit by the Imperial Navy, under orders from Tavan Pogno, the chaptermaster of the Stormbreakers. This drastic measure was used after orcs raided the planet, killing many and reducing their numbers to well under 300 Marines. The Xenos ruined the planet, decimating the population and destroying the Fortress Ministry. The civilians on Samut didn't give up without a fight, however, killing many orcs before eventually being overwhelmed or killed in the Exterminatus order. Having just lost their homeworld within decades of their founding, the Stormbreakers had to be rallied by Tavan Pogno to prevent them from scattering. As the chapter drifted around, attempting to lie low and minimize losses, they came across a large ship spat out from the warp. It was clearly home to some foul forces, but the ship itself was miraculously almost untouched by the corrupting energies of the Dark Gods. The chapter launched a boarding action, Terminators teleported directly in, and assault troops engaging via boarding torpedo. The ship had become home to a heretic Space Wolves warband allied to the forces of Khorne, known as the Bloodborne Wolves. After many days of battling, the ship had been claimed for the Imperium, but had taken heavy damage. After coaxing the machine spirit away from the worship of the Chaos Gods, the Stormbreakers finally had a place that they were able to house their operations from. Unfortunately, many of the STCs to replace the weapons and systems lost to time or indiscriminate purging of the former occupants have gone missing, leaving the Hooga to have whole sections closed off and for it to become a mere husk of its former glory. The Gifters, a Nurglite cult within the chapter, first appeared at the Battle of Bellum not long after the Stormbreakers found the Hooga. They led a strike against the Stormbreakers, taking out all the senior commanders before striking. They first sent towards waves of poxwalkers and plague zombies, alongside mere cultists wishing to attract the attention of the Plague God. The ragtag group of loyalists that were left took minimal casualties, using superior tactics and positioning to prevent being overwhelmed. Then came the demons. The horde was seemingly endless, plague bearers and nurglings tearing into reality to attack the Marines. Again, although they took slightly higher casualties, they were still minimal. Finally came the Gifters. The Stormbreakers' every move was predicted and countered, and losses were high before the battle even got into full swing. Eventually the battle was won, but only the librarian Darius Medes and a single Hellblaster squad were left alive. As the Stormbreakers are a fleet-based chapter, they do not have a permanent world to call their own. The Stormbreakers reside on a mobile fortress ship the size of a small moon, known as the Hooga. The ship, despite being so large, is capable of rapid warp travel and as such is able to deploy marines all over the Imperium Nihilus in an instant. The Hooga houses within its walls the chapter's whole fleet and all of the warriors who happen to be idle at the moment in time. It is a huge vessel and of a make and design not seen since the Dark Age of technology. It is believed to have passed through the warp at the end of the massive civil war and to have been spat out in the 41st millennium. Whatever happened, one thing is for certain. It was found floating around the void shortly after the founding of the Stormbreakers. A strike force was sent in, led by Tavan Pagno, to eradicate the forces of chaos squatting within. The vessel was crawling with heretic Astartes, demons, and the unfortunate souls of the original crew, possessed by demons. It took many weeks of fighting with both the crew and the ship, which had been twisted so much as to even do the bidding of its dark masters. When the inhabitants were finally eradicated and the full extent of the ship's damage uncovered, as it attempted to self-destruct to keep out these invaders, it was thought irreparable. However, with some skilled tech priests and a considerable amount of battling with the ship itself, it was working, and the chapter was able to move in. It now houses worship chambers, armories, docks, workshops, living quarters, and even an indoctrination chamber, to name a few features. The Stormbreakers are entirely non-codex compliant with only 500 marines and no companies. The Stormbreakers take a very different approach to ordering their troops, as most troops are ordered into two specialist houses, called the Sniper and Assault Houses. Members of the Assault House have grey pauldrons with red outlines, and members of this house include Aggressors, Vanguard Space Marines, Inceptors, Reavers, Terminators, and medium short-range specialized Interceptors. Members of the Sniper House have red pauldrons and will often have subtle camo design to help hide themselves. The Sniper House is the second most numerous house. Members of this house include Steingard Space Marines, long-range specialized interceptors, Hellblasters, and Scouts. The Stormbreakers have a very peculiar culture about them. They are extremely cliquey, preferring to socialize with Marines from their own house rather than mingle with others. They see humans as weak and necessary of their protection, and as such serve mankind more than they serve the Emperor himself. The Stormbreakers strive to perfect their craft, working harder and harder than their brethren. Unfortunately, this has led more than one brother into Slaaneish's embrace. The Hooga is the flagship of the Stormbreakers, almost the size of a small moon and of a pattern unique within the 41st millennium. The ship is in a state of almost constant despair, with many sections left empty and systems and weapons lost to time. It houses the Fortress Monastery at its center, with other areas, including a reclusium and a librarium, in sub-chambers beside it. The Stormbreakers are very firm believers of a slightly modified version of the Imperial Creed, which falls slightly closer to a united humanity, as the Emperor of Mankind wished for, but which still gives no leniency towards traitors and cowards, preferring, along with the rest of the Sons of Dawn, to face down unbeatable odds than to be seen running from a combat. Some Stormbreakers become members of the Gifters, but fortunately for the chapter, these are few and far between. The Stormbreakers' gene seed is surprisingly stable considering the circumstances and rumors surrounding it. However, very rarely a failed aspirant will be transformed into a deformed monstrosity of a creature with a hide as thick as Terminator armor, and, on the brink of death, these warriors may try to escape from their birthing chamber, and if they do, will go on a rampage, slaughtering anyone or anything that stands in their way. There have been many rumors throughout the centuries, perhaps the most worrying being the reports of the gene seed of the Stormbreakers being a chimeric one, and that they get their immense toughness from none other than the 14th Legion gene seed, having been spliced into that of the Imperial Fists by the genius Belisarius Cawl. The chapter tries to deny this, but the evidence is undeniable. The Stormbreakers are officially listed as successors to the Imperial Fists, but following further investigation, this is under scrutiny. The chapter deliberately attempts to slow the progress of these investigators, as, if they are found to be Death Guard successors, they will be declared excommunicate traitores. The Stormbreakers have been involved in a handful of campaigns during their relatively short history, showing their constant state of war and their need to prove themselves. Battle for Sannet. Sannet was the original homeworld of the Stormbreakers, but it was invaded by the Orcs not long after their founding. Not much data is found on this battle, except that Taven Pugno led a large force of marines through the Orc lines in order to call for a retreat and order an exterminatus on his own birthplace. Battle for Bellum. The Battle for Bellum was an infamous war in the chapter's history and is widely acknowledged as their first war since they became a fleet-based chapter. It also marks the first appearance of the gifters within their ranks. The battle took place on the remote shrine world of Bellum. It began with the forces of the Orc Warboss Bonecruncher gathering for a large war. The Stormbreakers, led by Commander Amadeo Prodita, moved to intercept before the crusade ever got going. Little did the chapter know, Amadeo had been corrupted by the plague god Nurgle. Amadeo ordered a strike on all senior officers until only the men with them were left. Darius Medes sensed this heresy and led a resistance force against the leaders before fighting Amadeo, since possessed by a greater demon of Nurgle, in single combat. The battle was long, both within the warp and real space, but Darius eventually came out on top, rooting the foul followers of the plague god from the planet. Battle of Kriak. The Battle of Kriak was a fearsome battle fought with the Stormbreakers and Iron Flesh, fighting the forces of Nurgle on the agri-world of Kriak. The fight was led by librarian Darius Medes, since risen to hold much respect within the chapter, and Commander Fabian Tibane. Tibane fought bravely, fighting alongside the Iron Flesh captain Chrysaor, slaying many thousand plague zombies and cultists. Darius engaged a member of the Gifters, Vretiul Ferrix, a former member of the sniper company who slowly fell into the worship of Nurgle. Their battle was legendary, as Vretiul destroyed Darius's axe and scarred his face, leading him to wear a half-helm into combat from that point on. The Stormbreakers, like all Sons of Dawn, are masters in siege warfare, using unrelenting firepower to crack open fortifications. Unlike other Imperial Fist successors, however, the Stormbreakers lean more towards a close combat-oriented style, using their sniper company to bust the walls open before jump pack and Terminator units drop and teleport in as more close combat-oriented squads rush in to destroy the building from the inside out. They also deploy a large number of dreadnoughts who prove their worth both in siege warfare and boarding actions, both of which the chapter specializes in. The Stormbreakers primarily wear storm grey armor with a bone-colored helmet and red exhaust vents. The assault and sniper houses also each have different colored pauldrons, the assault house having grey pauldrons with red trim and the snipers completely red pauldrons, and everyone else has grey pauldrons with a black trim. The librarians have the standard blue armor of other chapters with bone-colored helms and grey pauldrons with black trim. The Tech Marines wear red armor, symbolizing their pact with Mars. Field Tech Marines have a white left arm, however, while Tech Marines on board the Hooga do not. The chaplains of the chapter have black armor with skull helms and grey pauldrons with black trim. The Stormbreakers chapter badge is a stylized skull being crushed by a hammer. The skull has a large crack in it, and the hammer is producing large sparks. The Stormbreakers believe that the symbol represents their will and determination, crushing the foes of mankind. The Stormbreakers, despite their small numbers, have a very large fleet, as they are almost entirely fleet-based, with their capital ship, the Hooga, being one of a kind, only rivaled in size by the phalanx of the Imperial Fists. They have many smaller ships, mostly strike cruisers or low-orbit dropships, used to transport Marines to different battle zones in relative ease. As with every fleet-based chapter, the role of Master of the Fleet is very important, as any flaw in one of the biggest ships could lead to an extremely high casualty rate, especially if the Hooga suffered large amounts of damage.